Tell me when you're ready.
You're right.
Is that mic on? It's your phone.
The mic. Is the mic-
Yes, it's on. And
Okay,
we're
we
on.
have the mics on?
Yes,
Yep.
it's rolling on. I'm gonna count down.
You're ready.
Good evening. We'll call the Westland Peter Township April meeting to order. Just as a word, we have a limited participation. There's actually, right now, no one in the room other than those that are participating. I think Chief Walsh is here as well, Amanda Hickman from the Community Development Department. I saw
Chief Wazowski.
Chief Wachowski. James Kreider from the Public Works Department walked in. Dee Dee McGuire, our Township Manager. In person is myself, Supervisor Beers, and Supervisor Brenneman. Electronically, we have Supervisor Moyer and Supervisor Patterson. And joining us this evening for the first two items on the agenda is our Land Use Attorney, Bill Croswell. If those in the building will stand, we'll get say the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll get started.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is a zoning ordinance text amendment for Smucker Welding. It's at 2110 Rockvale Road. And Mr. Croswell will start this off.
Yes, this is a request to amend the text of the zoning ordinance, which under the municipalities planning code in Pennsylvania requires a public hearing before consideration by the Board of Supervisors for enactment as an ordinance. For the record, I think it's going to be helpful to just give some quick background as to this particular request. Back in July of last year, July 23rd, Smucker Welding submitted a rezoning request, which is a request to change the zoning map of the township. Smucker Welding is proposing as a farm service business to be a principal use, a welding operation, which under the current zoning ordinance would not be permitted as a farm-related accessory use. After Smucker Welding and its representatives made that request, the Lancaster County Planning Commission, which is required by law to review such a request, indicated that it was not in favor of the request as submitted, mainly because the result would be that within the agricultural district throughout the township, there would be the possibility of having as a principal use this type of activity, and that it was not consistent with the county comprehensive planning documents to rezone this particular area from its current classification as agricultural district to an industrial classification. The petitioner, Smucker Welding, listened to that comment from the County Planning Commission and decided to change the approach to be one of seeking an amendment to the text of the zoning ordinance rather than an amendment to the zoning map. And the general nature of that text amendment was structured as allowing certain farm businesses as a principal use by conditional use, which would mean that it would have to come before the Board of Supervisors in a quasi-judicial hearing to be approved, and it would no longer be a amendment to the zoning map. The petitioner, through its legal counsel, presented a proposed text amendment to the zoning ordinance. There were certain provisions of that text amendment that Lancaster County Planning Commission in its review and the West Lampeter Township Planning Commission in its review had questions and issues with. One was that the proposed text amendment was seeking a maximum building size of 25,000 square feet. County Planning Commission, I believe, indicated that that seemed excessive and that 15,000 square feet would be more appropriate. The proposed text amendment submitted on behalf of Smucker Welding also was going to provide for impervious surface of up to 50%. There was a feeling both by the County Planning Commission and the Township Planning Commission that that was excessive and that 30% impervious coverage would be more appropriate. And the maximum lot size proposed in the original text amendment submitted on behalf of Smucker proposed a 10-acre maximum lot size, and both the Township Planning Commission and the County Planning Commission indicated that they felt that 5 acres was more appropriate. The Board of Supervisors held a public hearing on February 10th of this year, and Smucker Welding has made the changes that both the Lancaster County Planning Commission and the West Lampeter Township Planning Commission have recommended, and that's what's now before the Board of Supervisors. In order to not prolong this particular hearing, rather than go through item by item the different documents that should be made part of the record, I'm just going to ask that the Township Secretary include in the minutes of this public hearing and incorporate by reference into those minutes the following items. There's a proof of publication from the Lancaster newspapers, LNP, where notice of tonight's public hearing and ordinance consideration was advertised on March 30th and April 6th, which meets the requirements of the Municipalities Planning Code. The recommendations of the Lancaster County Planning Commission staff, which are dated March 10, 2020, should be made part of the record of this public hearing. There's also a memorandum from Amanda Hickman, the Community Development Director, that should be made part of the record by reference, and that's her memorandum to you, the Board of Supervisors, dated April 13 today, 2020. And also, there should be made part of the minutes of this public hearing, the March 19, 2020 West Lampeter Township Planning Commission minutes. Most likely, I'm assuming that those minutes haven't actually been approved yet, or have they been?
They haven't been.
Just because the Planning Commission has not met to approve those minutes since that time, but Amanda was present, as I understand it, at that Township Planning Commission meeting, and I believe that you can state publicly that the proposed minutes that you've prepared and would be part of the record of this hearing represent accurately the action taken by the Township Planning Commission at its March 19th meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
I know the petitioner is participating through its representatives remotely tonight, and before we actually open the public hearing, do any of the supervisors have any questions about what I've said?
I have none.
Okay. Is there a representative participating remotely on behalf of Smucker Welding who desires to be heard?
Yes, my name's Tom Hilla from the law firm of Barley Snyder. I'm here to represent Mr. Smucker, and actually Mr. Smucker's on the line too. So I appreciate very much the solicitor's summary of where we've been and where we are right now. It's extremely accurate. We did start out with a zoning map change. We switched that to a text amendment after getting a lot of feedback from both the county planning commission and the township. And we have now worked our way back through receiving the recommendations with the changes that the solicitor has outlined and summarized. We walked our way back through there. We've got recommendations from LCPC and the Township Planning Commission. So we have incorporated all those requested changes from the last time we met back in February. So we appreciate it. But yeah, that is a perfect summary of where we are and where we've been.
And Mr. Nahil, I assume that if the Board of Supervisors does grant this amendment, these amendments to the text of the ordinance, and when this matter comes before the Board of Supervisors in the nature of a conditional use proceeding, that your client would be willing to abide by the requirements in the ordinance that would pertain to conditional use approval needed for this use. I mean, if this goes
Yeah,
without saying.
absolutely. If we gain approval of the text amendment tonight, we are prepared to move forward and submit a conditional use application very quickly hereafter, and hopefully move this along.
And I think as the board,
Mr. Smucker would look to move it along to hopefully get approval of that and move forward with the purchase of the property and actually construct his new facility after we all get through this whole virus situation.
and as the Board of Supervisors knows, legally, you cannot attach conditions to a legislative approval, which would be the text amendments, but as counsel for the petitioner has said, and would be the case, if this is approved, I assume it would be quickly, there's an application for conditional use. The petitioner has acknowledged and agreed, and it's part of the request that these revised criteria for the farm-related business would have to be met in order for the supervisors to approve the conditional use. And then even beyond that, there'd be the additional step, assume of a land development plan for the proposed building to be built on the property. Is that correct, Mr. Nahil?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we're willing to acknowledge it. We will go through that whole process.
Okay. As also, I believe the supervisors know and understand, as opposed to conditional use proceedings, you've had quite a few of those. There's no need to have a decision with findings of fact and conclusions of law and an adjudication and conditions attached to that approval. So in effect, the action that you're being requested to take is to enact the ordinance as last submitted on behalf of the petitioner and as advertised and as before you tonight. So if you desired to do so, you could act this evening, and the nature of the action would be to enact ordinance number and whatever the next ordinance number would be for the township approving this change. And just so it's clear, the caption of the ordinance upon which you're acting is an ordinance of West Lampeter Township, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, amending the Code of Ordinances of the Township of West Lampeter, Chapter 285, zoning to permit farm service business as a principal use by conditional use in the A agricultural zone. So as I said, the board could defer action on this, or if you're satisfied that with the rather extended process that this request has gone through, and with the confirmation that all of the requests made by the County Planning Commission, the Township Planning Commission have been satisfied, that you could, if you desire, act tonight. Are there any questions?
There's the 4 basic items that we're proposing, right? That's changing the ruling, the previous from 25,000 to 15,000 square feet. And then the impervious coverage from 50% to 30%, the maximum sign area from 32 to 10, and the maximum lot size from 5 acres to, excuse me, from 10 acres to 5. Those are the 4 items we're actually dealing with here, basically.
I believe that's correct, and those are the items that are stipulated in the ordinance, the proposed ordinance, if you enacted it, that is the current version of what you're being asked to approve. So I believe each of those issues that were raised by your planning commission, the county planning commission, are incorporated in the ordinance, which has been advertised for tonight and is part of the packet that you probably have before you. Does that answer?
It does.
And I don't know if we did the formality of first closing the public hearing, but that would.
We did not, but normally we do, but you want to
I would go ahead and just say that.
have a motion to,
sure you opened the public
Yeah, I don't think we even opened it.
we didn't even open it. We started. We'll open it now.
We'll open it. It
Okay.
I
I have a
think
motion to.
de
open it.
facto been opened, and now I think you can take action if there's no more public comment to close it.
Is there any public comment?
I don't have any comments. Hold on.
I'd second the motion to open.
I think we're closing it now. It was open like de facto.
I'd second the motion to close it.
Close the public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion, I heard another aye there. Motion carries 4-0 to close the public comment meeting.
It was 5.
Sorry.
5. You get Bob.
5,
Bob
okay.
came in at the very end there.
Thank you, Randy.
What ordinance number are we on?
Yeah,
No, she never
I do not have an
said.
ordinance number written down here for this.
Well, I think in the interest of
just
time,
need
you can just say whatever.
Text
the-
amendment
The
changes.
next ordinance number in the township's numbering system.
Looking for a motion?
We are, there's a sample motion for approval and a sample motion for a denial. Either one, made them want to make a motion
I think those may have been a carryover from the prior.
from the original.
Yes.
Okay.
So-
No, those are updated to reflect the new.
Oh, okay. But I think simply if you're ready to act, the motion could be to enact ordinance number, whatever the next ordinance
Next available
number.
in sequence.
And I've already read the caption of the ordinance.
The next available ordinance number, whatever that may be.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the next available ordinance number, the ordinance of West Lampeter Township, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, amending the code of ordinances of the Township of West Lampeter, Chapter 285, zoning, to permit farm service business as a principal use by conditional use in the A agricultural zone.
Motion's been made. Do I hear a second for approval?
I'll second.
Supervisor Beers made the initial motion. Supervisor Brenneman made the second. Any other comments from the board before the vote?
I'm going to recuse myself.
He recused himself, Randy.
You're, okay, you're accusing yourself. Supervisor Moore is accusing himself from the vote. Okay. Anything else? All those in favor of the motion to approve the Smucker welding with the change into the amendments signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And motion carries 4-0 and one abstention. Okay? All right, okay. Thank you for Smucker Welding. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything else on behalf
we
of
appreciate
Smucker
it.
Welding?
Do you guys have anything else at this point? Tom?
We do not need to thank you very much for moving this forward. We do appreciate, under the current environment, you guys continuing to have this hearing and moving everything forward. And we back with a conditional use application.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye.
Next on the agenda is a conditional use modification hearing for KFG Trucking, which is located 1004 Willow Street, Pike. And again, Attorney Croswell will kick this off.
Is there anyone,
I can leave. Want me to leave then? Yeah. Oh.
Here's Michael Hartman on the line. Yeah, yes, I know. Yeah, I'm not sure who the gentleman is. Okay, well, you're on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Doing well. Hope it stays that way, right?
Is that my pardon?
Yep, I'm here.
are you Kevin?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm Kevin Gilligan of KFC Trucking.
Before you get started, I think there's need for a brief explanation for the record of what this
Okay,
proceeding is all about.
I'm doing conditional use.
Well, I was going to give that explanation
fine.
and then let you proceed
Sorry.
once we get to that point. Mainly for the benefit of the Board of Supervisors, but also for anyone who's participating and interested remotely. I'm assuming Ms. McGuire, there hasn't been any public comment yet received anything about this. Okay. The history of this matter is there was a conditional use decision dated October 16, 2018, which was approved by this Board of Supervisors, at least the Board of Supervisors that was constituted at that point in time. And there were conditions attached, as is allowed by law, to that conditional use approval, two of which are relevant to tonight's proceeding. Condition number 8 in that October 16, 2018 decision was no wash bay shall be permitted on the property. And the property is the property that's involved in this request. And condition number 11 was that the applicant shall at all times comply with and adhere to the representations contained in his application and the evidence presented to the board at the hearing held on October 8, 2018. And one of those conditions, again, was specifically that there be no wash bays permitted on the property. The applicant now wishes to modify those conditions to allow a wash bay, wash area on the property. And the legal requirements for such a request are that there's been a change in circumstances since the time of the original conditional use approval back in October of 2018, which make the condition previously imposed inappropriate. And if the board should grant this modification of conditions, there won't be any injury to the public, won't have a detrimental effect on the public. There's not a whole lot of court case law on this kind of request, but the leading case actually is out of Lancaster County, a Commonwealth Court case, Ford versus Carnarvon Township, where Commonwealth Court held that if the applicant can demonstrate that there has been some change in circumstances and that warrant these conditions from being modified, and there's not going to be a detriment to the approval or to the public, supervisors can go ahead and grant the modification. And there's case law that indicates if you grant the modifications, you can actually attach conditions to the modification. And there were several things submitted that should be considered by the board if you grant this request in terms of compliance by the applicant with measures that will prevent the public from being harmed if this request is granted. And there's also certain documents that, should be just identified like we did for the prior hearing. And I would just ask that the Community Development Director make these part of the minutes by reference of this public hearing. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things I'm stating, that this hearing was advertised in Lancaster newspapers LNP on March 30th and April 6th, which meets the legal requirements under the Municipalities Planning Code. Property was posted, I believe, on April 6th, is that right, of 2020. And there's a photograph I've seen evidencing that posting occurred, which would be made part of these minutes by reference. The signed conditional use decision dated October 16, 2018 would be incorporated by reference. The request by KFG Trucking to modify the condition previously imposed by the Board of Supervisors that there be no truck wash on the property be made part of the minutes by reference. And all other documents that have been submitted by the applicant, KFG Trucking, requesting a modification of the conditions imposed by the supervisors in its conditional use decision. And those documents would include, there was a plan set, there are plan notes, and there is also, which is part of the township's record, it appears to be a document that was part of the land development approval and recording process, where DH Enterprises, the consultant for the applicant, was showing the items that had been complied with under the land development approval back at that point in time. So all of those things would become part of the minutes of this meeting. And Mr. Gavagan, you should be sworn by the court reporter before you testify.
You solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Okay, just make sure.
We're now going to hold a public hearing on this request for modification of conditions. And unless the supervisors have questions, do you want him to proceed?
Okay, do you want to open a public?
Go ahead,
hearing?
officially, you can open the public hearing.
Motion to open a public hearing for KFG Trucking.
Motion's been made and seconded for to open a public meeting. Any discussion with the board? All those in favor of opening the public meeting for KFG Trucking signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do I hear two over there?
I said aye.
You got it, okay. Motion carries 5-0. Okay,
Do you want to go ahead and present your request?
Do you want to go, Mike, or do I?
I can go ahead. That's fine. So good evening, everybody. Michael Hartman with DH Enterprises. Thank you for allowing me to call in remotely. With all the different exhibits that we have tonight, the main one is the revised land development plan, the grading utility plan. So what we had done was consulted with Solas's engineer, CM Smith, discussed with them all the different parts associated with the wash bay, and the resulting plan was submitted and approved by Solasa. What we have on the land development plan is in the bottom left corner is a blow-up view of the plumbing within the building.
just to show that we are separately piping the regular domestic wastewater out of the building. And then the water associated with the wash bay and any of the floor drains that are located immediately inside of the garage doors would be collected and conveyed to a 1,000-gallon grit oil separator where, the sediment could settle out and the oil would flow to the top, and then the regular runoff or, collected runoff would then carry over to the domestic and collect with the domestic sewer into the sewer line, where it would then be conveyed to City of Lancaster treatment plant and ultimately be treated. CDM Smith was okay with this proposal after we modified the plans to include their notes that they wanted. City of Lancaster was fine with the plans provided Celeste approved them. The oil grit separator is a standard grit separator provided by Monarch. Detail that's provided on the last sheet of the plan set that I had supplied. That's pretty much what I had with the plans and going through the approvals with Celeste. So I didn't know if you guys had any questions or what.
Do you have the notes from C.D. Smith?
Yeah, we do.
Did you have anything you wanted to present in addition to what your consultant presented?
No, then C.D. Smith wanted me to use all ductile steel to run all the way out there, the epoxy on the inside, epoxy on the outside, and all clean outs and elbows will be ductile steel. It's kind of salty, but that'll last forever.
So could you tell us what changed from your original plan submission when we approved it without the wash bays to today where you're back asking for the wash bays?
Just the kind of the convenience of cleaning them out there. I didn't really think about when I was in my original planning of it, but it'd just be kind of convenient. I didn't know what, I don't know.
Technically, we're still in the public section of the meeting, but can we close that and go on if we have no comments?
Are there any comments?
Well, I think in effect, this hearing goes on till
Keep
the
going?
end.
Okay. Okay.
So, question I have, and this would be more to the board members that were here when the original conditional use was granted. But how did we come to a condition for this property of no wash bays when that's what its previous use was?
If my memory serves, we were concerned on the, whatever he was hauling in the trucks would get washed into the public sewage. Okay.
Or in the river?
Right, or the river, right, and not get filtrated properly or collected. That was the whole,
I think
That was the mindset.
I think the original discussion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the original discussion was an exterior wash bay, wasn't it? Outside the building.
I wanted to tie it into the old, originally, came back after that original.
Please, you please use your mics.
Sorry.
People can't hear.
Sorry for
Thank
the
you.
Should I repeat my comment? I think the original, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original plan or we originally discussed this, we had talked about a wash bay that was external to the building. And I believe was the water going right to a rain garden? Was that right?
Well, that was on the land development plan.
yeah.
Yeah, that was on the land development plan, but that would have been after the conditional use.
Right.
I guess I was just trying to understand the story in the conditional use hearing as to how that requirement came to be in the
I
first.
think you
place.
were initially going to use the car wash system that was there, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get through, but I guess it's been outdated. It didn't have the standard or the updated grease oil grit separator. It had like an old fashioned one with baffles and I guess really we weren't really sure what was there. And it got turned down to do that, but it's like I said, there shouldn't be a drop of water that should land outside here. The board made it quite clear, they didn't want to wash it outside for any reason, being that close to the creek and everything. This is fully enclosed. And like I said, they had some conditions on there that, I need to have like a client's or a client service like that to come out every 6 months, keep records of when they're there, not to wash any other trucks other than mine was one of the conditions, that they could come on the property anytime and inspect the grease grit oil separator. I agreed to no problem. Is there anything else there, Mike?
No, that was it. I came into it late, but the condition of the conditional use was just flat out. There was no explanation to what it was. During the land development process, as we were kind of shifting things around and getting things into place, we did have a staff meeting where it was discussed that the main concern was that runoff would, or washed runoff would get down into the creek. So with that, then we designed a wash bay fully internal of the building, completely enclosed by curtains and doors. And then that the water would, instead of flowing out into the rain garden that I had originally proposed, would be collected into the treatment system, the sanitary treatment system, where it could be treated by a licensed treatment plant, and then safely discharged into the creek.
And Supervisor Brown, to answer your question, I believe the applicant at the time really wanted to get the plan through and get it through the process. And there had been discussion all along that this would be the long-term goal, correct?
That is true, yeah.
Right.
So you have one wash bay internal to the building.
Correct, it's inside, yes, sir.
Have you contacted the sewage hauler to find out how often do they anticipate the 1,000-gallon tank to be full? Any idea yet? It's a little early. But
No, it depends on how many trucks you wash and
Yeah,
everything else.
how often?
No, but I mean,
You'll get that with time.
yeah,
Okay. But they'll be the ones pumping it out
correct.
and also responsible for the maintenance of it?
Yes,
Or, okay.
And they want me to keep records up, like, in-depth records of everything, which I'll do.
The other, I'm sorry if there's another question. One other question on your print, I don't find a dumpster enclosure on this print. Is it on here? Is I'm missing it? I looked at it a bunch of
I
times.
mean, the dumpster for our trash.
Yeah,
No, Mike, I have what the old garage from Eagle Disposal.
right. Well, you have a fencing sketch on here to fence it.
Okay,
I think that's on the old one.
Mike,
Yeah, I'm checking my plans.
There's, I don't see any place where you're gonna install the dumpster.
Hold on. I'm just checking some of the actual land development plan to make sure this makes lost.
Yeah, it may be on one of the earlier
Yeah.
plans.
Yeah, it's there. It just, I turned it off with this plan by accident, but on the plan, roughly where it says macadam, kind of out in the middle of nowhere between, just to the left, upper left of the tank, in that area is where we put the dumpster. It's my understanding that once we finish with the conditional use and we get the decision order back, that I'll be resubmitting a revision of plans of record, just to incorporate this all into a recorded document, land development plan. And I would make sure that, that dumpster pad would be back on the plans, but on the recorded plans that we have recorded now, there's the dumpster pad shown.
Okay. All right.
You have to update the development plans, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, do you have any, Supervisor Patterson or Moyer, do you have any questions?
No questions here. Me either. Everything you said agrees with my recollection.
I'm unclear as to whether Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority has approved the discharge from the wash facility into the system. or, because they're just talking about a holding tank also. Is there gonna be a direct discharge into the Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority system? Is that
Okay,
correct?
Tom Donahue gave us a blessing on it. Mike, you wanna feel that?
I'm sorry, you were cutting out, but, what was the question was whether or not, Solasa approved the discharge of the tank into the septic system?
Well, maybe I was misunderstanding what was being said in the letter from Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority's consultant, but it seemed to be that what was being proposed was a direct discharge of the waste from the wash, the truck wash, into the public sewer system, but if for some reason that was not permitted, then there'd be a retaining tank of some sort that would have to be pumped out periodically. Is it one or the other, or both, or?
It's the oil grit separator that we have now. So the water from the wash area and the rest of the trench drains within the garage are piped to the grit separator, where it will allow the sediment to settle out of the water and the oil to flow to the top, so it's not being totally discharged directly into it as if we just pipe directly. Then that tank, then its overflow connects into the sewer lateral, which will get into Solasa's system, and then ultimately to the City of Lancaster system. But the notes on the plans under the grit oil interceptor maintenance notes were modified as requested by Solasa's engineer Tom Donahue for various inspections, cleanouts, and then also that the records of the inspections are to be kept on site. He's anticipating probably creating a form, a laminated form that's always in the building, that whenever something's done, it's filled out, so that when anybody shows up for an inspection, they can go straight to that paper and see what's been done and make sure that Kevin's maintaining the tank.
Do we have any,
I'm trying,
yeah, we don't have anything that says that Slasa is, there's no letter from Slasa saying we've approved this, it's just from the engineer.
well, and that's part of my question,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to understand, there are two,
CDM Smith is the engineer
Right.
for Slasa, so
Right.
they gave, you should have received a copy of that
Well,
letter.
look at it.
I think what it sounds like they're doing, and I think I was confused a bit initially as well, it sounds like they are using the tank system as well as going directly into the sewer system, so it'll be basically filtered and held. What can be sent to the sewer system will be removed by a separate hauler,
You're correct.
correct?
Yes,
So CDM Smith they
Yeah,
said that is satisfactory.
it ties into, it goes in and ties into the sewer line.
Yeah, the effluent, I mean, basically what this interceptor does, it's a grease trap, grease and grit trap is what it is. As the water's coming into it, it separates the oil, the grit, and everything else, allows the water that's clean to basically bypass, go straight to the sewer, and the interceptor holds the solid and oils. And on a periodic basis of 3 months, 4 months, whatever that it is, you have to get that pumped out. No different than if this was a commercial kitchen application, it would be the exact same type of structure that you would be installing. What I take from the sewer letter from CD Smith is basically, in a nutshell, yeah, I'm okay with this, but you're gonna have to submit for a sewer permit when it comes time to do it. And these are all the conditions that your sewer permit is subject to. So while you don't see any language specific that says that Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority hereby grants you permission to do it, they are saying, yeah, we're okay with it, go ahead and submit for an application, you're gonna be subject to the conditions of the application process. So that would be my take on this from an approval perspective from the Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority.
so as I understand what's just been said, which is
Yeah.
very helpful, that
This might be a letter that you can put in the
I think ELA comments number 2 and 3 address some of that as well, which they don't have anything permanent yet, but I mean, there's the if and when, I think is there.
Yeah, it says on the back of the $25 fee, some other steps I'd have to take there.
$225 is for basic permit fee.
And also it's almost all of Chuck's comments related to that.
Does anyone see a copy?
We have.
So as I understand that explanation, it's really a twofold process. The effluent, the liquid, at least at this point in time, has been approved to discharge as sort of an industrial waste into the Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority sewer system. But then there's another waste product, which is the grit, which isn't effluent. It's going to have to periodically be removed by a
Machine.
licensed hauler
Yeah.
and properly disposed of, right?
Correct.
Because when we get to the part of the proceeding where the board decides the action to be taken, I think it's important, and I'll mention this when we get there, that if in fact there's a private hauler that needs to be involved, at least generally DEP, requires some sort of contract, with that hauler, and eventually the municipality can get involved, because the view of the Department of Environmental Protection is that the waters of the Commonwealth are the responsibility of the municipality, even though DEP issues a permit. So the bottom line is, if there's a problem, the first door that DEP knocks on, may well be the township. So we want to make sure if you approve this, that there's a condition that if in fact the grit has to be removed and there's a contract with the grit hauler, that the township has no responsibility for that and any expense in preparing that document, et cetera.
Do we have in the current township code, and I apologize for not knowing it better, requirements already in place for standalone septic systems for one lot that would have a requirement that the landowner provide the township documentation of pump and haul?
Yes.
We do.
We do. I mean, I don't know, do you know offhand what those requirements are?
Every 3 years, isn't it?
Yes.
Every 3 years, every 3 years they have to provide documentation.
But those would be for domestic septic tanks.
Correct, but I was just surprised that it's 3 years. In my head, I was thinking at least twice a year. I was thinking the frequency rate. So yeah, 3 years won't cut it for this.
And I'm assuming that the applicant, your consultant, are agreeable to complying with all the plans that have been submitted and the conditions under which Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority would accept the discharge and the requirement for disposing of the grit. You're in agreement with all that?
Yes, sir.
The one thing that I did not see here on the ELA letter that I'm wondering wouldn't be pertinent in this conversation is while I understand how we got here with having a wash bay, and I do like the fact that it's interior to the building, it's not out in the open, but through this conditional use, given that we would approve it, I would like to see us put a condition on this that basically says that if you're gonna do this, it's gotta be inside the building, it can't be outside the building. The water has to be going through this grease chamber, whatever that we're calling it. I guess what I wouldn't wanna do is if we went down the road of approving this, that a year from now, we're washing trucks outside and we're creating a problem that was the whole reason why it was in the conditional use in the first place.
What I would be recommending to the board when we get to that point in this proceeding is that if you do approve the request, you attach conditions, and I can enumerate those for you, and then there would be a general broad condition that the applicant must comply with all of the applicant's representations concerning the truck wash, both submitted at this hearing and in their written documentation, whether directly from the applicant or through the applicant's consultant, or the conditions imposed by SLAS. So basically, everything you're being told, if it's not complied with, you have recourse due to the failure to comply with those conditions.
Do we have that as a previous condition from ELA anywhere? Besides, he wanted it inside or
It
anything?
just says no wash bays in the conditions. The previous conditions,
It
You
didn't
should
really,
have the
it didn't really state
previous-
that it has to be,
You should have the previous conditional statement there in your packet.
It's in the
Right.
bottom of that.
Yeah, and what we were passed out, the conditional use narrative
I have
is here. And that would
this,
be-
but it doesn't state that it has to be
Yeah, this one here, Barry.
conditional use, staff.
And I think he was looking at the previous conditional use agreement.
Yeah. Oh,
There's
okay.
See that
14
Yeah.
conditions. But it doesn't, number 8 is no wash bay shall be permitted on the property. There's nothing internal or external to it.
Right.
But it is in your engineer's letter that it must be inside.
page 6.
I believe that.
Which letter, Dee Dee?
8 on page 6, no wash bay. No, that says no
From
wash bay.
ELA on March 6th,
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
number 1.
Within the building.
As long as it's within the building and it's not external to the building.
Condition on the March 6th letter.
It should have been.
Give an extra.
I don't see what I'm looking for.
Can I just borrow it, at least, and remind me to return?
if we can add that, if that's, because I don't see it, that it has to be done in the wash bay.
Well, yeah, item 1 on the ELA letter dated March 6th, Chuck says,
Has to be within.
the sketch plan shall specifically show the location of the wash bay within the building as referenced in the narrative letter. So he's using the terminology within,
Okay.
which means it's inside the building, but maybe it needs to be a little bit more clear.
It says all truck washing, I mean, it's.
Shall be within the building.
I
Yeah,
don't know, that's pretty clear.
yeah.
Mhm.
Agreed.
In addition to the documents I identified earlier that should be referenced in the minutes and in the record, and part of the record is the letter from ELA Group Incorporated dated March 6, 2020, that we've been discussing, just to make sure that that's included in the record. Is there anyone who desires to comment either in person or remotely concerning this request to modify conditions?
This is Randy. I don't have a problem with it. I agree with, not allowing washing outside. That's a condition.
That was condition 1 on the ELA.
Mhm. Nothing out there from the internets?
No comments.
think you have a motion to close the hearing.
Motion was made by Supervisor Beers to close the portion of the public hearing. Second by Supervisor Brownman. All those in favor of closing this portion of the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, so 5-0 in favor of closing the public hearing portion. Mr. Croswell.
Yes, the procedure is somewhat different as far as the action that the board might take than in the prior proceeding that dealt with the text amendment to the zoning ordinance. There should be a written decision regarding this request, not as in depth as some of your conditional use decisions in the past, because they dealt with an actual conditional use approval as opposed to a modification of conditions, which this request is. But I do think it's important, and I think you've already talked about some conditions, and I just mentioned a couple others for you to think about. In the recent plan submission that has some general notes on it, I would suggest that, all of those general notes that are on that recent plan submission on behalf of the applicant be imposed upon any approval. And that would include all the general notes, the truck washing operations, restrictions and grid oil, interceptor maintenance notes as a condition of approval. And then I would also suggest as a general condition, just to cover anything that might not be specifically identified, that a condition be attached which would require that the wash bay is installed and operated in accordance with all representations made by the applicant and in accordance with the requirements of any other governmental agencies having jurisdiction regarding the location, installation, use, and operation of the wash bay.
I can't write that fast.
Do we have to vote on this evening? Or
No.
Can we
There's not-
actually get this in a format where,
Right, there's not a time limit, at least under the law. Whereas with the prior proceeding with the text amendment, it was a matter of enacting an ordinance that was already
as long as we get it right with everybody, fine.
I don't want to put the applicant off either.
I don't either, but I want to get it right when we do it. That's all.
Solicitor Croswell, can you provide the exact verbiage that you just spoke of for the final minutes or for the final action or document?
Sure, I can,
Okay,
if you want, after we conclude the hearing.
please.
Okay.
That way the board can go ahead and vote on this now.
And again, just so I understand, that there is not a separate building structure for this wash bay, or it's all within the truck storage area?
Yeah, well, it's outside the building, so that, it runs across, how far away, Mike? 30, 20 feet?
The tank?
Yes, the tank,
Yeah,
Well,
the tank,
the
the
whole-
tank,
the wash bay
within like
area.
10 feet of the building.
I'm sorry,
The wash bay itself, yes, is it
it's completely contained right in the middle of the building in the second bay,
the existing building?
the building I just built, yeah.
Right, so there's no new structure
No,
involved.
no,
No, and the building layout is included on the plan that I've submitted just to show the location of the wash bay and that it's internal to the building under construction now.
I mean, there should be no, all the drains catch anything, even the drains in the middle, the drains towards the front of the building will catch from running out of the garage doors or anything. I really should not lose a drop of water to the environment.
And it's been a while since this matter was addressed in the original conditional use proceeding, and I'm assuming from what I've seen with plans and information that the actual truck terminal is complete
Mhm.
at this point in time. So,
But 90%,
but in any event, the wash bay is gonna be internal to a building that's already completed.
correct, yes, sir.
Bill, can we also, as part of the, we talked about the making a condition upon the ELA letter of March 6, 2020. Could we also include the CDM Smith letter as well of March 26, 2020? I granted that's the Slauson engineer, but
Oh, yes, and that may have been one of the documents identified earlier, but just to be clear, yes. So it'd be both the SLASA letter and the ELA letter.
One question I would just have to this, so we're approving, what's before us now is to revise the conditional use. But that wouldn't absolve them from having to resubmit a new land development plan for approval, correct? Or not?
Well, I'm assuming from the answers I've gotten to some of the questions I've asked, that the view of the applicant is that there aren't any buildings involved that would trigger a land development process.
But it would trigger a re-recording if the plan sheet
changes.
has changed, then that would require a re-recording of that plan sheet.
That's a good point.
There would need to be modifications to the land development because those specific conditions were also to be included on the plans, which is one document that you received. It's actually a copy of the notes that were incorporated in the land development.
Right. And I think that's why I don't want to make this 100 times harder than it really needs to be, but there is a process that you have to follow in doing this, that it's not as simple as just saying, yeah, it's approved and life goes on.
No, you're exactly correct. And the only thing I didn't know is whether there'd been discussions up to this point in time between the township staff and the applicant as to whether, which would be proper, there'd be a revised land development plan.
We haven't gotten into that yet. He was really focused on just amending the conditions
But-
before moving forward on anything else.
But do I understand that it's the township's position that if the Board of Supervisors approves this request to modify conditions, then at a minimum, the township staff would be looking for a revised land development
I
plan?
think that would be required, yes.
Okay, I want to make sure that everybody understands the process.
But that wouldn't be an action item on this board to review and provide approvals. That could rest on staff, correct? Because you're not changing anything other than you've changed the wash bay and how it's draining, and it's just saying, okay, we're good with that. If, sheet number 1 and 6 were the ones that were part of the recorded sheets, they get replaced in the recorded set, and it's just an amendment to the recording.
It may be, and I'm not certain of this, that, the recorder of deeds, if you're gonna be submitting a revision, even though it's, one sheet revision, is gonna require signatures, from township officials on that recorded plan sheet. As
I'm
opposed
not
to,
sure. I only have a very small clip of that sheet. I don't have the full land development plans in front of me, but if it's that first or second sheet with signatures, then they would need to be updated and re-recorded.
'cause normally the Lancaster County Recorder of Deeds, as far as subdivision land development filings are concerned, will not, accept for recording a document that isn't executed on behalf of the governing body of the township, which is the supervisor. So it may at least take some sort of motion at a meeting to approve the execution of that revised plan.
Okay.
But the process, I think, could be simplified to the extent that it's acceptable to the township staff.
I think that would be considered a minor amendment, and that would just go before the board.
Okay.
Are
we gonna be able to read your writing, or do you wanna?
Yeah,
Give it back to us.
Yeah, I can be able to read my writing. I'll have to provide the township manager with what she needs for.
We're voting tonight? But what is the language we're voting on? If I mean, I started drafting something here, but I think there's a big piece that Bill has on the tail end of it. How do you want me to handle that? Or whoever else wants to make the motion?
Well, if you want to proceed with the rest of your meeting, I can sit in the back and write something out if you want.
They have to have the entire narrative this evening to vote on it?
The entire motion, I would think,
Well, the motion in effect is going to be their decision.
yeah.
Do you have it written down that Supervisor Beers can
Not yet.
No,
read it?
not at this point. 'Cause I mean, we've talked back and forth with
Yeah.
on several items.
Well, maybe if you can go to the conference room and draft it or write it, can we do the audit and then you come back and take a vote on this? Is that okay?
On to me, it works for
You
everybody
you
else.
okay with that,
Shouldn't be
Bill?
I
long.
mean, I had no idea, of course, of what action the board would take tonight. And again, it's a lot different than,
No, that's fine.
But I mean, I think what I heard was, what I've jotted down was just that the revised conditional use would include the plan notes as submitted by, DH Enterprises, and then the ELA letter of March 6th, and then also subject to conditions and requirements, per Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority in the city of Lancaster, Senate, have a basic understanding of what that would be. And I agree with that.
okay, well, let me try to draft something that,
Okay.
but I think you can at least, if you're prepared, and ready to do that, close the public hearing if there's no more public.
You
comment.
guys ready to vote tonight on the motion?
I am.
Get it together?
Yeah, I mean, I am, yeah.
You have time to do that? Tonight?
I'm here.
Okay.
Well, I just have a question. Should those items specifically be included in the modified language of the conditional use? I mean, what's being requested are specific modifications to number 8 and number 11. I just don't know that referencing, that particular letter or ELA specifically, is it appropriate to include those in conditional use? Because that's, I mean, contractors change and, you know what I mean? Is that really what we're doing here, is adding that in the conditions themselves?
Well, what's being requested includes submissions that have been made on behalf of the applicant. The applicant has presented correspondence from Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority. Apparently, the township engineer has issued a letter commenting on this. So all of those comments or representations already made by the applicant would be part of the record and could be incorporated and made part of the conditional use decision. I'm assuming that the applicant, even though it's arguable whether it's necessary on a modification request, would waive, because that certainly would make it a lot easier, findings of fact and conclusions of law as part of this proposed action. What I'm thinking in terms of is a document that would be perhaps titled decision, and it would, based on the comments I've heard, be a decision of the Board of Supervisors approving this request, but subject to the conditions that we've talked about tonight. And then if I can get that together while you're doing other things, I'll come back in and present it to the board for consideration.
Kevin, can you wait another 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, let's do that.
Where's he gonna go? We're quarantined.
What's that?
So where's he gonna go? We're quarantined.
He's gonna go to the lobby. Did you guys close it? Did you close the hearing?
I thought we did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
we
not,
did.
I'm not going to ask if I could.
we did close, we opened and closed it.
Okay. Have to come back for everything.
Can you wait in the lobby, Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, there's another thing I wanted to ask if I could.
Can Bill use the conference room?
Yes,
On a separate matter.
go ahead.
Was wondering about petitioning to or filing for an inspection license for the property, to inspect trucks, and whether or not I could do any outside work at all.
That is not something that I'm prepared to discuss tonight.
That's a curveball.
Yes,
Alright.
absolutely.
Should I-
I think you
should I
and I
state it
should
for me?
discuss
Okay.
prior to.
Okay.
the board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if you can take your things and go to the lobby, I'll come get you.
See you in 20 minutes, Bill.
Looks like you got a long agenda. Yeah, we should go to the office.
Thanks, Steve.
I'm gonna be firing motions like crazy.
So we'll get you both back.
Randy and Bob are gonna start making some motions.
I'll come
Jeff
get you
and
when we're
Rick
done.
can't be the only two guys making motions in a second.
They're probably sitting there eating cookies.
Yeah. Well, with their phone on mute.
Also in attendance tonight is Vicki Harnish from the financial department.
And we have Megan on the phone.
Hi, Megan.
Hello, hi everyone.
This is the annual audit report for 2019 with Megan Simkowski from Trout Ebersol CPA.
All right, so you're all ready for me?
I'm all ready for you, Megan.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me on the phone this evening to present. Such a strange way to be doing this, but these are the times that we're in. So I'm here tonight to present the 2019 audit results. We issued the financial statements well in advance of the March 31st deadline, and the DCD report has been e-filed and accepted. So, you know, the year's pretty much closed after we do this presentation. So our presentation is in a similar format that we've done year over year. It's just a high-level summary of the actual financial statements, which I believe you have all received at this point. So we're on slide 2. The first 2 pages of the actual financial statement itself is our independent auditor's report. And we are pleased to announce, similar to prior years, that the township had an unmodified or clean audit opinion, which means your financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. The next about 5-6 pages of the financial statements are management's discussion and analysis, which are prepared by Dee Dee and Vicki, and it's a summarized version of the financial statements, which oftentimes is a lot easier for the user to follow, and it gives management the time to present some highlights and explanations, if you will, of what happened in the current year. So let's move into slide 3, which is the government-wide statement of net position, or the overall balance sheet. Just a refresher that your government-wide financial statements is a consolidated look at your general fund, cap reserve fund, your park capital fund, and your highway aid fund. And it also includes your capital assets and debt. So that's why it looks different from the individual funds. So looking at the numbers, total assets were about 19.1 million. That is comprised of your current assets, which are cash and investments, and your capital assets. Your cash and investments increased by 229,000 from last year. And then your capital assets increased. You had quite a bit going on in the township this past year. At December 31st, 2019, you had $145,000 of construction in progress related to the Gypsy Hill, Village Park, and Willow Street streetscape projects. You also had $738,000 in infrastructure related to projects on Shiprock Road, Broadmoor Drive, and the Menser Road box culvert. And then you also purchased a police vehicle and some equipment. Total liabilities at December 31st, 2019 were about $1.6 million. The primary decrease from last year had to do with the principal payment of $270,000 on the 2012 general obligation bonds. So overall, the total net position from a government-wide perspective was $17,567,000. If you want to turn to the next slide, this is the government-wide statement of activities, or the income statement. Overall, total revenues for the year were $7,866,000. That is slightly down from last year, but a lot of good things happening in the township. Charges for service revenue, that increased by about $236,000. Operating grants were up $146,000, and that had to do with some monies received for the DEP grant for the Groff Plain restoration, as well as the Lancaster County Conservation District grant money for Menser Road. Capital grants and contributions is down significantly from last year. Just want to highlight to you all, that's where you would record on the government-wide perspective any dedicated streets. And that last year you had a lot of activity, and that really drove that number up in prior years. Within the general revenues, just wanted to point out that miscellaneous income at about $140,000. Within that amount, there was a $120,000 refund from the township's participation in the ICC, and that's your self-insured medical program. So total revenues, as I said, were about $7.87 million. If you want to move to the next slide, this will take a look at the government-wide expenses. Overall, total expenses were right around $7 million even. I have a couple notes here. That's an increase from prior year of about $643,000. Really just want to say that, like with Public Works, that increased in line with the spending of the grant money that we talked about on the previous slide. And you also had budgeted salary increases that was driving that up in the current year. So overall, changes in net position was an increase of $861,714, which leads to that ending net position of $17,567,000. Moving to the next slide, this is your general fund results. We like to present it in a comparative format between prior year and current year, but right now I'm really going to focus on the 2019 actual versus the 2019 budget. Total revenues of $6,929,000 exceeded budget by $452,000, so that was a favorable variance. That was driven by about $206,000 more of tax revenue received related to earned income tax and real estate taxes. And as I mentioned on the other slide, you have that $120,000 refund from the Intergovernmental Insurance Cooperative. Total expenditures were about $5.7 million, which was $309,000 under budget. So really going down the line there, I was just trying to highlight what was driving that. Insurance, it was a really good claims year. And it's hard to say insurance costs are high, but you did have good claims experience, which brought your total expense for the year well under budget. What's interesting is you're aware there was that extra pay period in 2019 that occurred and was paid prior to year end versus where you budgeted in 2020. But it's really, given that you came in under budget on so many other categories, very hard to see that here. So overall, there was a net change in fund balance, a positive change, so an increase to your general fund of $327,000 versus your budgeted decrease of $386,000. So the ending fund balance for the general fund was $4,285,000. I do like to point out there, when you're looking at your fund balance, I like to look at it in relation to the expenses of the general fund. So if you were to take, if you look at that, compare the fund balance to your total expenses, the general fund could cover approximately 8.5 months worth of the township's expenditures without receiving any cash through the door, which is a really nice fund balance to have. We usually recommend about 4 to 6 months, so you definitely have a solid ending fund balance. If you want to move to the next slide, we'll head into the general capital improvements fund. Overall revenues for the year into this fund were $172,000, and that was really driven by those 2 grants that we talked about earlier on in my presentation from the DEP and Conservation District. Total expenditures were about $920,000, and that had to do with some of the road projects we talked about, the purchase of the police vehicle, and you do pay your debt service out of this fund. The general fund also did transfer in $627,000. So ending fund balance for your cap improvements fund at the end of December 31st, 2019 was about $2,032,000. On the next slide, we summarize your current long-term debt. So as you can see, the actual debt itself, the general obligation bond, has an ending balance of $1,345,000. Did want to highlight, as you're well aware, the township did issue the General Obligation Note Series 2019, but as of December 31st, 2019, no principal had been drawn down. Moving on to the next slide. This is a summary of your park capital project fund. So kind of an overall comment, which you're all well aware, comparing actual to budget. The Village Park project was postponed, so there's, that's causing these significant swings between budget and actual. But total revenues for the year were $206,000. The biggest driver here would be the $198,900 of the fees in lieu of land dedication, with the largest amount coming from Willow Valley related to the parkland South Point. I did want to point out, I'm not sure what happened to my slides, but Parks and Recreation, the expenditures were actually $84,459. Somehow one jumped in front of it. But that's related to community park and neighborhood park development expenditures. And you also had $200,000 of a transfer in. So ending fund balance in the Parks Capital Projects Fund was about $658,000. Moving to the next slide is the State Highway Aid Fund. Total revenues for the year were $514,000, and that's driven, as it is in pretty much every other year, from your state allocation. That was about $505,000. And then expenditures were $783,000, and that's related to the various budgeted road projects, which includes the Broadmoor, Shiprock, and Pioneer Road. So ending fund balance in state highway aid was $301,619. The last slide filled with numbers would be your other post-employment benefits trust fund. Total additions for the year were $665,293. For presentation purposes in the current year, instead of showing transfers from the general fund as just that transfers, they're now being shown as other contributions. Just a more accurate way to reflect that. So the 2018 numbers were reclassified for presentation purposes this evening. Medical insurance premiums paid out from this fund were $28,000. So for a net change of $37,198 in this fund. So your ending fund balance is $557,241. The next slide is, just a refresher for you all on GASB 54, which defines the governmental fund types. So if you want to move to the next slide, we like to break that down into numbers for you. So as you can see, the township has restricted balances, which pertain to the highway aid. Those amounts are restricted because the use of those funds are dictated to you by the state. You have quite a few amounts assigned. So those are amounts that the board sets aside for certain funds. So within the general fund, you have the $90,000 for the police HRA. Your total capital improvements fund is completely assigned, as well as your parks capital projects fund. And your unassigned balance, which is what you use pretty much to pay the day-to-day expenditures of the township, that's within your general fund. That's about 1.9 million. So all in all, when you look across all the funds, you have a total fund balance of $7,276,000. I know I went through that pretty quickly. Does anyone have any questions at this point? And be more than happy to answer them.
Not seeing any. Bob, do you have any comments? Supervisor Patterson?
No, I reviewed this information previously and concur with Megan's presentation.
Thank you. So
Great.
Megan, what kind of
Well,
a shape are we in? In a
I
nutshell.
would say, well, that's a loaded question,
Yep.
given the current state of affairs. But obviously, as you could see, the numbers at December 31st, you're in a really strong financial position. You're very well budgeted and well stacked, if you will, for your future projects on the horizon, as well as you have secured quite a bit of grant money as well for these larger projects, which is also very helpful. So I would say strong financial condition.
Any other comments from Megan?
None.
Dee Dee? You said all your words to her before. Megan, thank you very much.
Great job, everybody.
Thank you. And I want to thank Dee Dee, Vicki, and the rest of the staff. I think this audit went really smoothly. Definitely a challenge trying to wrap it up remotely. Our firm is pretty much working from home at this point. So do want to thank everyone for their help. And we do really appreciate our relationship with you. And thank you for your business. Hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Vicky and Dee Dee, thank you too, because you did the large carry.
Great job.
Thank you. For those online, we're going to try to scare up Bill Croswell.
Can't comment. It was just painful.
That should have been that
Jeez.
difficult.
Thank you.
He's not ready yet, so he'll need to continue on.
Okay,
We got minutes next.
we can,
Take your mic.
Bill Croswell's not ready yet with his recommendation, so we can go to public input period. Anyone that's online?
No
Nope.
public input online.
Nobody's input, okay. Then the next item is the minutes from the regular meeting on March 9th, which is our ahead of front of you. If you want to go over those and give us a motion to forward them on or corrections. Hey, you guys electronically, you don't have to be out there somewhere.
Okay, well, I move that we accept the minutes.
There you go. Motion's
I
been,
second.
is that a second?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, motion's been made and second to pass the minutes on as written, correct? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Motion carries 5-0 to pass the minutes on. Next, we'll go to the monthly planning reports with the treasurer, Vicky, or Bob. We have those in front of us too. Anything you want to point out to us, Bob?
Well, other than that, for the first quarter, we did pretty well, but I think financial challenges will rear their heads in the remainder of the year, given the uncertainty of some of the income, particularly from the wage tax.
Correct. Yeah, that's being, I guess, worked on in the second half of our meeting as well with the tax collection bureaus and so forth too. They're taking the hit as well. Do we have any other questions or we can take a motion to accept the minutes and accept the secretary's report and pay the bills.
So move.
Second,
Second.
Supervisor Beers made the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0 in favor. On a roll. James,
Yes.
you're next.
Are you done with them two guys out there?
No, they're in waiting.
Okay, okay.
Alan Fox.
Yeah, you have my report. We're trying to stay busy between the storms and the rain and everything else.
How'd you make out today?
Everything we done today, well, not everything we done today, but we had a lot of trees go down in the state roads.
Yeah.
All of our roads were okay.
That's good.
So we keep them trimmed and everything, you know, a lot of rotten, but we did a lot of state roads. Yeah. But we made out pretty good. Yep. So,
I heard one of your guys had a shocking experience.
Sounds like foreshadowing.
Huh?
shocking experience.
Shocking. And they back into a electric fence?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I forgot all about that. Yeah, he got jarred big times.
Yeah. Blow him off his feet or what?
Oh, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got to watch the electric fences.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of excitement back there sometimes, but
Yeah. Well, it breaks up the monotony, doesn't it?
yeah, they couldn't wait to tell me the next day when that happened. So, yeah. So, yeah, we're doing a lot of work down at the park here and there and stuff. So that's basic what we can do. And we'd like to get the mulching, but the weather is just killing us. So
It'll pick up.
it'll pick up. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Anything for,
but if you want to do the blacktop or you want to wait to the end.
You could certainly go ahead and do that now and then.
yeah, I do not have any papers for that from me.
Well, it's on the end of the thing.
What's
No,
on it?
it's permission for me
To
to
do it.
bid this out
Okay,
for stone and blacktop
all right.
for this year.
We have
I
a
just-
motion to have James go out and get prices for blacktop.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved, seconded, and actually third.
Yeah.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. Motion carries 5-0. Go to it, Jim.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You still want me to stay around?
Chief. Thank you. Waiting it out.
Absolutely. Thank you to Mandy for getting me squared away. You had my report before I touched on that. I just wanted to quickly just thank a couple people. First of all, Kenny Barton, emergency management coordinator, came through, was able to get us a number of things, like 100 surgical or 195 masks. Yeah, actually 140 and 95 masks, 100 surgical masks, face shields. We're supposed to get 126 boxes of latex gloves, but they didn't put them in his truck. So he's going to pick them up tomorrow and bring them back to us. Yeah, and I mean, actually every township, not that there's anybody here, but the employees for doing what they're doing, but also the board of supervisors as well. You know, it's a different environment that we're working in, obviously. Appreciate everyone giving the respective supervisors the opportunity to lead on a ground level. So I think that's huge. You know, I'm not looking for sympathy, empathy, or anything else, but it's been a very frustrating time, to say the least, as a leader, especially just from my standpoint as a leader. You know, my primary responsibility is to make sure I get tools for my officers to do what they need to do. And we're up against literally a worldwide shortage of everything we need to do. Issued order several weeks ago, or probably about a week and a half ago, that the officers have to mask up, glove up, or eye protection. But you know, we're doing everything we can to get masks. You know, but anyway, it's been a little bit of frustration, and I think you sensed it with my emails. I was not frustrated with you. When I say you, I mean you, plural, personally. I'm frustrated with the situation because, you know, again, it says, and this is no fault of anybody. It's you know, it's a worldwide issue, and we can't get masks. And every time we get close, we think we're getting masks. Apparently, the shipments get diverted, and they go someplace else. And that's just kind of what we've been dealing with. But we've had great support from the community. EHC, a local company, came in and sanitized our vehicles for free last week. Yeah, it was great. We were actually able to get several, actually, I think it was actually 15 N95 masks from Langston Family Medical, Dr. Wheeland. She had someone drop off masks for us. It was incredible. It was great to see that stuff. Dollar Store donated some hand sanitizer to us. Tattered Flag in Middletown donated additional hand sanitizer we put in the vehicles. So we've been making do. But you have my report. I just wanted to throw that out quickly before I got to my report. I highlighted those things in red.
How's your new man doing?
He's doing well.
He's in training.
He's in training with Officer Murray. That's not ideal either, frankly.
No.
It's less than ideal to say the least, but we really had two options. Honestly, keep him at home, or bring him in here and hope for the best. And we chose the latter. I don't know what decision is right, to be honest with you. And I guess we'll find out.
Even if he's in the office, there's things to learn.
There is, but he has to go out in the street because there's only so much he can learn here. And when, if he's out in the street, that means he's in a two-man car with Murray because he can't be by himself at this point. But like I said, I guess the other option was not to hire him yet, which we couldn't do because he already quit his job.
We didn't know that.
We didn't know that, and he quit his job.
Yeah.
And then the zombie apocalypse comes, right? So we're kind of dealing with this. So those were our options. None of them were great. But we chose, and we talked to Murray about it. I say we showed, and I talked to Murray about it to make sure Tom was good with it, and Ed, and they were both good with moving forward as we had. So, and I highlighted, these are literally probably, I would say maybe between 10 and 15% of the changes we made internally that I've highlighted here. Some procedurally, some policy wise. But just so you have an idea that we're trying to make every effort to be as safe as we can. Again, we still have a job to do. We still have to protect the public, and we have to be visible. That's all part of the job. So we're trying to manage that the best we can.
You're all doing a great job, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. We continue to get calls about things. One of the calls that we're getting now a lot is about Media Heights.
Walk-ons?
Yep, but it's not a business. The business is closed.
Yeah, they're just walking on.
They're walking on playing, and if they're not members of the club, then that's the owner's responsibility. But frankly, it's no different than across the street people playing frisbee golf at Boot Miller Park. So it's checked with the DA as well, just to verify to make sure I was, on the right path, and she agreed. It's closed as a business, so they're therefore in compliance with the governor's orders. As you see, Lisa vote tentative resignation.
Right.
We need to get that posted. Frankly, was not priority, but it should be, but priority for me at this point was getting stuff. And that's what we had to do. And frankly, even if we did, we're going to be in a bit of a situation because we can't do interviews. Yeah, I guess we could do phone interviews. Yeah, Zoom interviews. Yeah, right. So we're behind the eight ball a bit with that, but we're making do with what we have. And with only able to have one person, if we hire somebody new, they're going to need to go through training, which means they're going to need to be in with Rachel, which means we're kind of violating our own 6-foot policy and everything else. So, I guess it is what it is. And then some of the work that the guys are doing, I highlighted there. As you see, Chris Mitchell attempted kidnapping. If you didn't see it in the paper, got a guilty plea from that, 12 to 20 years, which was awesome. And that was the stranger attempted kidnapping. that we had.
And the Amazon driver was there too.
Yeah, so much for essential services, right? Yeah, officers did a really good job tracking that down immediately and actually getting the driver stopped shortly after that happened, because we had a bit of a time delay, because the victim actually went home and called her mom. Didn't call us right away, which happens a lot. Called her mom, and her mom said, "Hey, call the cops," and did, and we were able to, guys were able to get him stopped.
He's still driving around making deliveries. Was he? Not-
Oh, yes, he
not
was.
now, but I mean, he was just going about normal after that.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Okay.
He was, not anymore, but he was. So,
Chief, are you seeing a reduction in the number of incidents as a result of just the quarantine and shutdown, or what do you see?
Yeah.
What do you guys see?
yeah, frankly, a lot of our calls, I guess I can face this way, there's not much of a public to turn my back on. Yeah, we have tremendous decrease in our call load. Frankly, many of our calls, most of our calls, but they're starting to pick up with some domestics now. We're starting to get that, and that's kind of where our fingers on the pulse of that, and potentially mental health calls, for obvious reasons, right? But a lot of the other stuff has really kind of died down. But we do get a number of calls about businesses being open or people not abiding by the social distancing or not wearing masks, and those are not enforceable things, as we know.
We don't have a lot of, we're not endowed with a lot of businesses in the area, but I heard some police departments are getting calls from break-ins on businesses because there's no one there. Is that?
That is a concern. Yeah, that is a concern, and that in addition to what we're worried about is robberies.
Yeah.
At some point. I mean, the bottom line are fiends are going to be fiends, right? The fiends don't really recognize the pandemic as being an issue for them.
And the longer it goes, the worse it's going to get.
It's an opportunity. That is exactly right, and they're gonna fulfill that need one way or the other, right? Before either through thefts, and if they can't commit the thefts, then robberies or burglaries and thefts and stuff like that. So yeah, they're gonna keep doing what they can to supply their need. And from what I was reading nationally is that it's harder to get right now at this point to get a lot of the drugs are getting popped at that point of entry.
Yeah.
So which potentially then could run the risk of causing trickle-down effect for like CVS stores, pharmacies, apothecaries getting robbed, and then people going back to the old school, oxy for heroin fiends. And so, but we're trying to stay on top of that.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't call it a worry, but I would say a sense of concern is that the longer that the quarantine process goes on, the more likely you're going to start to see that opportunity present itself. But in a short term, it probably won't. Longer term, a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever the time is, I think that'll be the trend that we'll start to see.
I agree.
It's a little bit of a civil unrest kind of mentality. And, like I've told different people, is most of the honest people, I don't think you're going to have to worry about it. It's the ones that are, that aren't honest, the ones that, feel like they're in a corner that they can't get out of that's where we're going to start to see some problems, I think.
I agree, and we're also going to see problems again with domestics, people just getting tied up, and then mental health issues because people potentially losing their jobs, not having money, and then that frustration will bleed over into, the domestic type situations. Wearing the masks, that concerns me. There's a degree of anonymity with people walking around wearing masks.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that, 6 weeks ago, if you'd have walked into Turkey Hill with a mask on, they were calling you saying, a guy just walked in here with a mask on.
Yeah.
Now you don't walk in somewhere.
Now they call us when they don't have a mask on.
Exactly.
Seriously,
Yeah.
I got a call today about somebody saying, hey, people are walking in and out of this store and they're not wearing masks. Okay, we're not enforcing that, but to your point, yeah, you walk into a bank with a mask on, that's normal right now.
Yeah.
But again, it provides a degree of anonymity, so that's a little disconcerting.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's kind of what the concern is from my standpoint, yeah. And I think everybody probably nationally is worried about that as well. Locally, we're talking about that. We don't have our chiefs meetings, but we are making conference calls every Wednesday So everyone kind of stay on top, it's kind of best practice type thing. And we talk about that all the time, about where everybody stands with that.
Bob, Randy, do you have anything for the chief? Nope.
It's not.
They're sleeping.
They're
Tony,
muted.
Randy, I got nothing. Thank you, Chief. I talked to the chief earlier this week, so.
Yeah, we did touch base.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, sir.
Sorry I had to wait so
No
long.
worries.
Thanks, chief.
Thank you.
Is Bill ready yet, you think? Nope, okay.
Wow, you did.
Amanda-
quick
Amanda-
manifesto over there.
We're gonna be here all night reading it. Amanda, you're next.
I will keep it brief. You should have my report in front of you. We will see some zoning requests coming up probably in May, mostly relating to the Sunoco, both properties located on Willow Street Pike.
Okay, can you update us on what the Sunoco, anything?
So the first item that they have submitted for is the appeal to a zoning decision that was made. It was regarding the gaming use on the property. They have the games of skill. The state is still, kind of wish-washy on how we're supposed to handle those. So we had sent cease and desist for both of those properties. They're appealing that.
They had that in the,
They're in both of the buildings.
really?
Yeah, and initially the issue was that they had seats at each of the units, so they were out in the aisles, it was a fire safety issue.
Those places are jammed full of everything they can sell anyway. I can't, I haven't.
There was
been
no
in one
room to
for-
walk around.
Yeah, you can't.
No.
Without the gaming issue, you can't. Okay.
So yeah, we have some appeals for them. And then additionally, depending on how those appeals go, they would like to, they have submitted for zoning map amendment for one of the properties being down at the triangle closest to Willow Valley. And then they've also submitted for a special exception for those games of skill specifically. So depending on how the first one goes, will dictate how we move down the line. So all of that is basically on hold right now. Sheets is just in process, trying to get their things recorded. They're dealing with it. I just now today actually received the final piece of paperwork to go with Wise Gas and Go.
Okay.
So they are ready to record.
All right. Good.
Outside of that, I think my department and Willa's administration has been dealing with yard waste phone calls, trash, yard waste and bulk item removal is just suspended.
I heard that's a big one. People are calling about the trash pickup. Why is that? Just because they're a little later in the day or what?
Well, Penn Waste is low on staff. They've cut back, so they don't have the full, number of employees working on the trucks.
Right.
They're really focused on trash and recycling removal. It's all they want to focus on right now. So they're doing everything that they can to keep up with it. People are producing more because they're home.
Right.
So that's where their focus is. Yard waste is just not a priority. It's not considered essential to life
Right.
by the state, so it's not being dealt with.
The problem is, I think a lot of people either haven't gotten the message or not abiding by the message, but they're still leaving it at the curb.
Absolutely.
And it's just sitting there rotting.
And what we've told those that have called, we've let them know, you can bag it in a normal trash bag. You can set it out with your trash. It will be picked up, but it needs to be in the plastic bag, and you still have to remain, at your limit, which is 3 bags per pickup. I think what sort of compounded this was that when the bills were sent out, they had that nice, flyer included, and it gave the date for the start of yard waste and the April 18th event, all of that. And simultaneously was when everything was canceled. So it's been difficult to get the word out for sure. I'm trying to stay in touch with the chamber and identifying loan programs, everything, that's available to the business community. We're sharing that on our website, and I'm sending it out to everyone possible. So SBA, anything regarding payroll protection, economic industry disaster loan. All of those are available on our website, and I've been sharing them. So if you have anyone else that you think I should be sharing that with, send it my way. Outside of that,
Okay.
nothing new.
If you see Mr. Pfeiffer, thank him for looking into investigating his financing. It's not like he's dumping it all on our lap the way it seems, so
He's doing his research,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
appreciate it.
we'll do.
Thank you. Okay, I guess we're going to, before we get to Dee Dee, we'll go back into the hearing for the conditional use for KFG Trucking, as soon as we locate them in the lobby. If we make the motion, do you want to read the motion?
Yes, I was gonna, once you're convened.
Okay.
Holy moly.
He gets paid by the hour, you know?
It's paid by the sheet of legal
This
paper.
sheet, yeah. Welcome back.
Oh, man.
Okay, we're gonna go back into the conditional modification hearing, conditional use modification hearing for your business, KFC Trucking. Next item would be, if I'm not speaking out of turn, to make a motion either to accept the modification or deny the modification. Is that correct?
Right, I have a draft
Right.
decision with proposed conditions in it for your consideration, if you're ready.
We are ready.
Fire away.
Bill, for those out there electronically, Bill's gonna read his version of what he wrote for us so we can get it going farther down the road, okay?
Thank you.
Right,
Yep.
and again, I understand that the applicant has agreed to waive any findings of fact and conclusions of law, and to have a decision of the board tonight, is that correct?
Please.
So the proposed decision that I've drafted would state, I move that the Board of Supervisors grant the request of KFG Holdings LLC and Kevin G. Gavagon, and then they're defined as the applicants, to modify conditions numbers 8 and 10 imposed by the board in its conditional use decision dated October 16, 2018, subject to the following conditions. Applicants shall be bound by all of their statements and representations made in their application to modify conditions and at the public hearing held on April 13, 2020. Number 2, applicants shall comply with the recommendations and comments of the township engineer and its letter to Amanda Hickman dated March 6, 2020. Number 3, applicants shall comply with the letter dated March 26, 2020 from CDM Smith to the chairman of Suburban Lancaster Sewer Authority. Number 4, applicants shall comply with all truck washing operations, restrictions, and grid oil maintenance notes contained in the plan set submitted to the Board of Supervisors as part of this request to modify conditions. Number 5, applicants shall hold the township harmless from any actions by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection or any other governmental agency regarding the truck wash facility, including effluent discharge and grit removal. 6, the truck wash shall be installed and operated in accordance with the conditional use decision dated October 16, 2018. Applicants shall comply with all other conditions imposed in that decision and the requirements of any governmental agencies having jurisdiction. Applicants should submit a revised land development plan for the truck wash facility as may be required by the township staff. Any violation of these conditions shall be deemed a violation of the zoning ordinance and enforceable as such. And then it would be dated as of today with signature block for each of the 5 supervisors with a notation that the decision is dated and filed, whatever the date is after all the supervisors have signed, after a hearing held on April 13, 2020.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that? Members, board members? Okay. Hearing nothing?
Yes.
Okay.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Supervisor Beers, as motion is given by Attorney Croswell. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Supervisor Brenneman made the second. Any other discussion before the vote from the supervisors? Hearing none. All those in favor of the zoning ordinance text, the conditional use modification hearing for KFG Trucking and the motion given, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I heard 5-0, so there's no abstentions. Motion carries 5-0 in favor.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You, Mr. Gaffigan, you heard all those conditions and you were agreeable to those conditions and accept them as part of the approval of this modification request. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right, thanks. Thank you very much.
It's a nice gateway into the township. This is just me speaking.
Recommendations?
It'll look nice, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It already,
It looks a lot better than it did. Let's put it that way.
The insides are crazy. It's like, really nice.
It's tough to keep a trucking garage looking good, but, you know.
As
so-
best you can.
Yeah, okay,
I
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Going back to the regular meeting now, in the Township Matters Manager's Report.
I think most of what I needed to discuss with you this evening is on the agenda. There was one thing that came in after your packets came out. I have a request from the CFO for Lancaster Family YMCA, and they are requesting that you would extend the due date for their rent, their lease payments for 60 days. They are obviously not getting any revenue at this time because their doors are closed.
Could you remind me what the total monthly lease payment is?
$1,500.
That scares me.
It's low. I don't know if they're doing that to everybody just so they get it out there, maybe?
I didn't ask them.
So it's a deferment on day 61. There's a check for 3,000 plus the next month's 1,500.
Yes, they would like to delay payment until they reopen. It should be on or before June 1st.
I don't have a problem with it, with the exception of the fact that it worries me. I hope they're not in a situation where they're struggling. The $3,000 is making a difference between staying open and not. That's all I'll say about that.
Anybody else? You want to take a vote?
Please,
We should have it.
please.
I'll make a motion to defer the YMCA lease payments for 60 days. It's a deferment.
Is it, the question on that motion, is that a deferment of the current payment or all payments?
All payments until June 1st.
So each payment would be deferred 60 days.
So it just backs everything up.
So everything's backing up 60 days.
Until that 61st day.
No, so if your April rent isn't due for 60 days, your May rent isn't due for 60 days, and your June rent isn't due for 60 days, you won't start catching back up again until July, August, and September.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The way that's written, there's no end date.
Yeah, there isn't. You're right.
So what are they asking for?
Please accept this email as my formal request to extend the due of our rent payments. As you may know, due to COVID-19, our facilities are currently closed. As such, we are not drafting our members. I'm not sure what she meant by drafting our members, and therefore have no regular revenue at this time. We would like to delay payment until we reopen, which at this time seems unlikely to be before June 1st.
Can we require them to,
So have they, what was the last lease payment they paid? March?
Yes.
So I would like to amend my motion to say that we will grant them 60-day deferment on April and May.
Either that or by,
did you hear that, gentlemen?
or I was
I
gonna
did.
say,
Okay,
we just revisit.
That's a deferral of the payments for April and May.
correct. Is that right?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, we don't want an open-ended deferral.
Right, that's exactly right.
Okay. Motion's been made. Here, second.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any other discussion before we take that vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries for the 2-month deferral. 5-0. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, I will let the CF know tomorrow. Thank
Okay.
you. Everything else is on your agenda.
Okay. Give me a second here till I leaf through some of this, going back. We're in Township Administration Matters. We're back to Resolution 5 of 2020, ratifying disaster declaration of March 17th. You have that in front of you.
Is there anybody actively watching that might need to explain these documents?
There are, I believe, 9 participants right now.
Okay.
My only question on this resolution, would it be it further resolved, there's, in the second sentence, it says, take all appropriate action needed to alleviate the effects. That's sort of open-ended. I mean, just, we're giving him 100% authority to just do something, whatever he sees fit.
You're giving who?
The Emergency Management Coordinator.
Well, yeah, the emergency management coordinator, correct.
The emergency management coordinator always works through me, and I always work through the board.
That's what I wanted to hear. Is that okay with everybody?
I'm okay with
Yes, and your engineer says to let you know he is watching.
Okay.
Hi, Chuck.
All right. So here a motion for Resolution 5 of 2020.
So moved.
Commander, somebody make a copy of this for me so I can take it along.
Supervisor Beers made the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Supervisor Brennan made the second. Any other discussion for the ratifying disaster declaration? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0 with Dee Dee in charge. The next one is approve amendment number 1 to general obligation note for the Village Park loan. And that's sort of self-explanatory if it's read.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Very good.
Second. Patterson.
Supervisor Patterson made the motion to approve the resolution.
You had more on
Yes, general obligation note, and Supervisor Moyer was the second or vice versa, whichever. Any other discussion? All those in favor again signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion again, and no objections. Motion carries 5-0 in favor. Resolution 4 of 2020, extending the real estate tax date for 2020. That's in your packet as well, and there's an explanation as to why.
I think Supervisor Moyer said something.
Randy?
No, that was just a sigh.
Oh, okay.
An audible sigh.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what will the date?
It's just extending the penalty, right? There's no penalty and it's extending the time to pay, but it doesn't like extend the I got the impression that, discount doesn't get extended, right? It's just, we're waiving the penalty.
Yeah, if I can briefly explain, if you look at your real estate tax bill, if you pay the total by April 30th of 2020, you get a 2% discount. This municipality, historically speaking, gets probably 70 to 75% of that real estate tax revenue in the discount period. Then you move on to the base tax period, and that, if it's paid by June 30th of 2020, it is a certain dollar amount considered the base tax. The 10% penalty kicks in after June 30th, 2020. So what the county treasurer, along with the county commissioners, are discussing is doing away with the 10% penalty. Now, originally, the county treasurer had approached and asked the county commissioners to extend the due date with no penalty until December 31st of 2020. After many of the municipal managers talked to the county treasurer, we did express some concern about pushing it to December 31st, which would mean that in many cases, we probably would not receive the revenue until January of 2021, which would certainly cause a problem for the township budget. So she has told us that she will go back to the county commissioners and ask them to look at the end of November rather than the end of December, which would help us out. So the resolution you have in front of us, in front of you, is simply saying that you would agree to what the county commissioners agree to December 31st or earlier than that. And we are hoping that they will agree to the November 30th date. Additionally, the county and all municipalities must agree to do this or it will not happen.
And I say, if we get 70% of people in the prepayment period, we will get that money sooner, right?
Historically speaking, we receive 70 to 75% during the discount period, which is before April 30th, and then 95 to 97% is received by June 30th. So yes.
Yeah. I'm assuming most of that's because a lot of people escrow their taxes and then have the mortgage companies pay the discount period.
Absolutely, absolutely correct, yes.
So whatever the
Well,
date is,
yeah, I'm fine. I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution. I think you said it was 4.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
It's actually 6, but yeah.
Do what?
It's resolution number 6.
Yes, okay.
6.
Second.
I'll second it.
Supervisor Brennan made the second. Any other discussion for
just to make sure I'm clear, so whatever day they choose, let's say we do end up with November 30th, then on December 1st, the 10% penalty comes back into play.
No,
So it's waived forever. So there is no, so it's really open-ended.
well, but we,
only the penalty?
right. No, it's due by November 30th.
It's just, there's no 10% penalty being levied.
Right.
But would we collect that anyway as a township?
Yes.
Or we would, it doesn't stay with the Lancaster County tax collection?
Well, we pay Lancaster County to collect the taxes on our behalf, so they get a percentage of whatever's collected.
There's a carrot, but there's no stick.
It is. What are you gonna do? Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Next is discuss the board's consent to delay the 2020 upset tax sale for past due real estate taxes. Again, that's another one you have in your packet.
Yes, the upset tax sale, normally those properties would go to tax sale, September 30th. There are very few in the township. Generally speaking, we don't have a lot of those that we deal with, and normally they're taken care of before they actually go to the tax sale. So this is not going to have a huge effect on your real estate tax revenue. And it's just a request to extend the 2020 upset tax sale to the same time frame for 2021, just giving people an extra year. And the judicial tax sales, we don't have any in this municipality, so that doesn't really apply to us.
Again, does everybody in the county have to approve this for it to enact? I mean, there's an awful lot of municipalities and school districts that are asking to do this.
The resolution you just passed, that was the case. This one I don't believe is the case.
Okay. Anyone want to enter a motion or a comment? This doesn't really affect us that often, there's not a lot of, like you said, there's usually not a lot there.
Very little. We're very lucky.
But
in
the
that
risk of
regard.
upsetting Dee I move that we adopt the resolution.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is made and seconded. All those in favor of the delaying the 2020 upset tax sale signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion again carries 5-0. I hear everybody talking this today, okay? Discuss due date change for 2020 spring trash bills.
This is simply a request to extend the due date to June 30 instead of April 30 for the spring tax bills.
Josh.
That's just for this year or for every year?
Just for this year, one time.
This is just for the spring of
Just for the
2020.
spring, has nothing to do with the fall, just simply for the spring, extending the due date 60 days to June 30th with no penalty.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move we approve that.
Okay.
Patterson.
Motion been made by Supervisor Patterson. Is there a second?
I'll second
Supervisor Brenneman made the second. Any other discussion for the trash bill change? Hearing none, all those in favor of changing the due date on the 2020 spring trash bills to June, right?
June 30th.
June 30th. Signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, didn't hear any opposed. Motion carries 5-0 again in favor. Last is change orders for village park construction. Again, they are in your packet, and Supervisor Brenneman may have a couple comments as we go along on this thing as well.
Well, and Engineer Haley has offered him, himself we can call him if you'd like to.
First one is the general site contract. At number one is no charge or no cost change, but delivery time delay. That's something you were after, right? But Rick?
No, I wasn't after that, but that's normal in a contract job like this. That's normal when there is a delay, just to basically substantiate that there is a delay, and then ask for more time as a result of that. It has zero impact on the dollars. At this time, it has zero impact on the dollars. It's just a time extension is what it is.
Do you want to take these together or separately? Let's do them
That's
separately.
completely up to you.
Yeah. Anybody have, let's hear the rest of them, and then we maybe can do them all together.
Yeah, I mean, the one, change order number 2, just to be clear on that for the board, to CH&N site, the RPZ assembly, what that is a reduced pressure zone backflow preventer. That was originally intended to be in the plumbing contract, but because we're not there yet as far as a plumbing contractor, and we want to have the ability to potentially irrigate the fields, we need to install this. So it's either we pay CH&N do it, or we wait to do it later in the plumbing contract. So you were always going to spend these dollars. It's just now you're going to spend them through CH&N.
little ahead.
And number 3 with the milk, or number 2 there, number 3 in the item, number 2 for Mill Creek fence, is really just upgrading some of the fence fabric from 11 gauge to 9 gauge. along some of the baseball fields to be a little bit more durable. What happens with the lighter gauge material, not to bore you with detail, but the lighter gauge stuff with mowers and weed whackers, it'll tend to bend pretty quickly. In 3 or 4 years from now, you'll probably say, well, that looks like crap, we ought to replace it. It's cheaper now to just pay the upcharge from 9 to 11 as opposed to putting all new fence fabric on there. And that's really what the change is related to in a nutshell with the Mill Creek fence.
You concur with that, Chuck?
He's, we can get him on the phone if you'd like to get him.
No, he's not on there now.
No, he's not, we can
We'll
call him.
defer, we'll defer to Rick.
But Chuck is, I mean, those were,
I'm okay, I agree with Rick, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
he's the one, Chuck is the one that submitted them, so he's good with it.
And Chuck and I did talk, Chuck and I talked about all of these items before he gave this letter of approval through, so.
I'm not questioning you, Rick.
No, that's okay. I'm not questioning. No, it's all good. It's all good.
Came off like that, didn't it? Jeez.
Chuck is good with it, he says, yes, he concurs.
Okay. Okay, we have 3 changes, and we need a motion to approve or deny one or more, however you want to handle that.
I would make a motion that we approve change order number 2 for CH&N Construction for the installation of the RPZ assembly. Change order number 3 to CH&N Construction due to the COVID-19 shutdown and the ability to receive supplies and work on the project have been affected and cannot estimate what effect that will have on their contracted time. And I would also move to approve change order number 2 to Mill Creek Fence and Decks for the upgrade to the 9 gauge fabric from the 11 gauge fabric fencing material.
Motion, okay, motion made by Supervisor Brenneman, Supervisor Moyer made the second. Any other comments from the board? All those in favor of the passage for the change orders signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Heard all 5. Motion passes 5-0 in favor. Before we dismiss, is there anything?
You can go outside or go on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry it took a while.
Thanks, Bill.
That's okay.
I didn't know that you wanted to decide.
But we did it right.
You did it right.
That's what counts.
Okay,
Thank you.
go on.
Thank you.
Was there something I missed about getting into the,
No, there was one other issue that we wanted to discuss, and that was in regards to Supervisor Brenneman's
okay,
email that you just received earlier today.
Did they, I think you and I talked about them trying to get approval to be essential. Did they make any progress with that?
They did submit a waiver request for the exemption. They have not yet heard. They've not gotten a decision on that. Representative Briner has been very helpful in trying to move that through the process, but unfortunately, as far as I know, sitting here right now, they have not gotten a decision.
I 100% agree with Rick's email from earlier.
Yeah.
We gotta get that stabilized.
Yeah, I think the big issue is, for us as a township is we're under the public eye in so many ways, and even, if we don't do anything, we're under the public eye from an environmental perspective, not being compliant environmentally. We do go down there and work. We're also going to be under the public eye. Well, why are you guys working and nobody else is allowed to do this? But I think the governor's direction in this was fairly clear in the fact that, as municipalities, we can determine a little bit exactly what is considered essential and what isn't essential. Now, listen, I'm not saying give these guys a blank slate to go do whatever. I'm not saying let's get into more work than we're already into down there. What I am suggesting is that we go down there, we get what grading that can efficiently be done
with the idea that we want to get to the seating and landscape component of this now before summer hits, so that we're able to effectively stabilize that site. If that means the other two phases that CHNN has kind of the site work to kind of pigeonholed into, we have to defer them to start that work till later on in the year when either this shutdown order is lifted by the governor, or, I mean, that's what it's gonna take at this point, is really for that order to be lifted. And in talking with Matt here this afternoon, a little bit, I talked to him, I guess, a couple of things. One, I don't want us as a board to take a position like this if they've already received word back from the state that said they were denied an exemption. I wouldn't want to do that, I guess, number one. And then number two, how long would it take for us to work down there to be in a position that we're able to do the seating and the sodding? Matt's best guess right now, looking at the schedules, he thinks it's about 3 weeks worth of work. And just to be clear, the contractor Hummer Sports Turf that does the sod work is an essential contractor to do the work anyway. So when we get to that point, even if we're underneath the do not work order, that particular piece of this is exempt anyway. And so to me, if it's just helping us get to that point, I think we can explain it in the fact that we're doing the environmental right thing. Again, that task of site construction is already a social distance activity by itself. I mean, you don't hold hands when you're running bulldozers.
Right.
You know, it's one man and a machine, and that's really the extent of it. And I think it's going to be helpful for us. If we don't go along with it, I think the potential for this to cost the township and that park more is really likely, because you're going to have additional costs somewhere along the line. And potentially,
I would say even if the waiver was denied, I'd want to know what the waiver specifically stated, because I still think we have a situation, an environmental issue concern that could still fall into the criteria that Rick sent around on the residential part.
yes, agreed.
Let's do it.
And, you know, the other piece to this too is to just think about, you know, if you don't get this done now, the potential exists that you're gonna miss another playing season down there. And you might anyway. I don't know that right now, but it's more likely now than what it was before. So anyway, but I think that between myself and Chuck, as well as Dee Dee, I think we need to be very clear on what it is we're authorizing or allowing them to do, and what our expectation is, you know, review the social distancing, the whole 9 yards. We need to be proactive to this situation, but we also need to get the job done too. And so I think there does need to be some parameters established that say, here, this is how we need to do this.
I know a lot of contractors have been allowed to finish what they've started, but can't go to the next level. I mean, if there's 3 phases, they can do one, but they can't go to number 2.
And part of the reason I think, I mean, while I can't be sure on this, is a lot of the projects that I'm currently involved in, we got exemptions, but we were very quick to submit those exemptions.
Before they got bottled up.
Before they got bottled up. I think, you know, again, they got over 500,000 exemption requests that I think they're inundated to the point that they're struggling to try to sort through it all. I think number one, and I think, you know, again, you have to be very creative when you pen and craft your letter for exemption as to substantiating the reason, and even going as far as saying how you're going to comply with the governor's order as part of that whole exemption process. And I don't know how CHNA crafted theirs. I would question whether or not it was crafted correctly to get them the exemption they were looking for. But that is what it is. So
Environmentally, we're probably, if we pass this, if we let them continue, we're doing the right thing.
I believe that we are very,
It'd be
yes.
terrible to
I mean, like I said, you know, under the NPDS permitting process, you have 7 days from the time that when you don't grade something for 7 days, the law requires you to do stabilization. So even if we didn't do anything else right now, they need to be down there tomorrow,
Yeah.
putting temporary seed and straw mulch on. And if we're like within 2 weeks of being in a place where we could put grass down, or 3 weeks, then let's take it to that level and get that part of it done. And then we don't need to worry about it. And then we can decide when do we move into the other phases of the project and when is the timing right and all that thing. I mean, that's my personal opinion.
Bob and Randy, how you feel?
I think we should move forward. Yeah, I've said
Okay.
several times now, let's move forward.
Do you need a voice vote or is just a head nod is
There's an
good?
email vote out there somewhere. We all responded yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, if the board agrees, they're fine, we're fine. I would make one request that if Supervisor Brenneman and our engineer Chuck Haley could talk to CH&N and speak to Matt about this, to let him know and talk about the parameters that you spoke about. If you could speak to him about that, that would be very helpful to me.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. And I'll give Chuck, I mean, I don't know if Chuck's still on or not, but I'll give Chuck a call in the morning and then we'll kind of discuss and go through that before we have a conversation with CH&N.
Was there something,
Well, I was just gonna add to it. Can you hear me without this?
yeah,
Okay, because I've been dealing with the waivers a lot lately, you don't actually receive a copy of what was submitted.
can they hear?
They should be able to, yeah,
Okay.
it's through this. You don't get a copy back on what you submitted
Right.
for your exemption request, so they may not have saved that when they submit it, I'm not sure, but I think if we're going in for stabilization and any sort of landscaping, we're covered. So I think we would be fine either way, and if we haven't received anything back in terms of a response from the state, it's not necessarily a no.
Correct.
It's like you had said.
They
they're
may be
just
already under the
backlog.
exemption.
Absolutely. I think they're focusing now heavily on sending out updated waiver language. They had sent out or started
they
to send
closed-
out that language on the 31st to clarify who had already received a waiver. So they're dealing with that, but I think this project would be suitable for continuing.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. We're good?
I think that's it.
Anything else? Yeah.
This is Bob. Question for Dee Dee. Dee Dee, do we need a motion to accept the auditor's report?
We did not. In confusion, we did not take a vote.
You're right, Bob, you probably should do that.
Okay, I move that we accept the auditor's report for 2019.
Thank you, Bob.
Second.
Been made and second, all in favor, signify by aye. Aye.
Chairman Hershey, if you could ask for public comment one more time, please.
Do we have, okay, for anyone out there that's not in the building, do we have public comment from anyone? We'll be glad to hear that now. It's too quiet.
See any?
Everybody there? Okay.
Have a great evening from Chuck Haley.
Okay,
Last
thank you.
thing, I just want to publicly thank both of you and Chief and everybody else who's been keeping this township running during this mess. So thank you for all the hard work that you and your staff have done.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
One thing for sure, they're disinfected. So I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks, Randy and Bob.
Thank you, everyone.
We sent our guys home. And then I applied for an exemption. And heard from every other company we compete with that they were open. I said, how do you guys, well, you sell rubber and plastic parts. Wait a minute, it's Bell, it's not, well, it goes on a,
Bye,
Goes-
Randy and Bob.
it goes on a conveyor.